What's up, everyone? In today's video, I have a conversation with the Bo Jackson, one of the greatest athletes of all time. We talk about how he went from living in a 700 square foot house with 10 siblings to becoming one of the greatest athletes of all time and doing the Bo Knows Nike commercial, which is one of the biggest campaigns ever. Talk about that and what he's been up to in the last 15 years. Enjoy.
A lot of people don't know how to separate what they do for a living. They don't know how to separate their job from the life after that job. Because a lot of people think, well, this is going to last forever. And it doesn't. And I was never in that boat. I never thought that way. Even before I went to college, I knew that I wanted to be in and out of college sports, professional sports by the time I was in my early 30s, mid 30s. Sports was never the center of my universe. And I think that's where a lot of people cheat themselves.
For my audience, a lot of marketing, small business, young entrepreneurs, I think they're, want to hear the backstory behind the Bo Knows campaign.
We were doing storyboards for a commercial. This was when computers was first coming on the scene. And we had the storyboards laid out here on the table. Instead of getting on the computer, this was archaic. And we were trying to figure out how we should combine these posters to do one scene. And we had a little too much going on. So I said, why don't you take this and put it with this one? Let's take this one out and we can use this one in the other scene. And somebody across the table said, wow, Bo knows. And it stood out from that conversation sitting at the table back in 1985, 86. And that's where the Bo Knows campaign started.
Has anyone seen Bo's ball? I know, Kansas City. Nice shoes.
Did you think it was going to be big? Do you think
Nobody knew that the Bo Knows campaign would have been that big, and it's still going 30 years later. But luckily, we had the right people. We had the right marketing group. We had the right director. We had the right producers behind the scenes and making sure everything go right.
Did you mind all the attention? You said you wanted to deflect it. You didn't. Once the camp came, I imagine you go out now. You getting everyone recognize you everywhere you go.
Listen, even in college, when everybody claimed my teammates, because without them, I wouldn't be the person that I am. They helped me get to where I am, and I was never a flamboyant person. Put it to you like, I wasn't Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders is a good friend. He is a very good friend of mine. Charles Barkley is a good friend of mine. And I was and I think it stems from my speech impediment as a kid, that I was always quiet. I always want to stay in the background. And till this day, I'm like that. I would rather reflect the attention to someone else, because now that I'm older, I don't need it. And most of the time, I don't even want it. Yeah. I know how I am. I like my privacy. After a football game, I'm room 221, Sewell Hall. I was in my room, and I got my door open in my dorm, and the dorm is a ghost town because everybody's out partying. I understood at an early age is that in order to be a superstar on the playing field, you got to be a superstar in the classroom first, because every week you get up and read the paper. Some high profile athlete is in trouble. I knew where I come from, and I knew how hard my mother worked to support 10 kids. I didn't want anything to reflect back on her.
How was your upbringing?
My mother raised 10 kids in a 3-room house that was less than 700 square feet. That was right at 700 square feet. Jeez. Outdoor plumbing, which means we had an outhouse in the backyard. No running hot water. I went to school barefoot, weather like that outside.
In the snow?
In the snow, because I didn't have shoes to wear. I'm thinking that's normal. I'm thinking that all kids that don't have shoes to wear got to go to school barefoot. I realized that I was the only person sitting in the classroom with no shoes on. And the teacher noticed me, and she contacted the Board of Education, not because my mother was a bad parent, but because I didn't have shoes to wear. I remember this man's face, got me and took me downtown Bessemer and bought me a new pair of shoes. So me being down to earth, you can't miss something that you never had. or never experienced. And I try to help people because a lot of people helped my mom out when I was a kid. There were days, hell, when we didn't have nothing to eat but cornbread. My mother was a custodial worker. But in the thing that I say about that, instead of calling them a maid or a janitor, I call them custodial engineers, because that's what my mother was. And whenever I speak any big convention to where they're serving dinner or something, I always make it a point to recognize those people. And the thing that I do when I see these people, I stop them and shake their hand and say, I see you. I see you.
One thing that I'm really impressed with is that you grew up, you had a bunch of brothers, your mom was working all the time. From the stories I've heard about you, like your morals and your discipline, and that, I'm curious how you developed that, like the morals about Tampa Bay, the morals about going to Auburn. Where do you think that came from?
It's just the fact that when my mother said that she was going to do something, she'd do it. Period. And most of the time when she said that she was going to do something, it was more like, boy, I'm going to whoop your ass. And then I take out running. And she tell my brothers and sisters, if you don't catch him, you are going to take his ass whooping for him. And they chase and they run me down. But that was all part of my childhood, because I needed that. Because if I didn't, who knows where I would be right now.
What happened with Tampa Bay?
At the time, they knew that I was going to be the first round, that I was going to be the first player picked. And they had the first pick in the draft. They also knew that I was a standout baseball player. And first couple of weeks into baseball season, I was hitting 600 with 8-9 home runs already. And we were just 2 weeks into the season. And I had to take a visit. You know how they take a visit to the teams that's probably going to draft you first. And I had the guy that was acting as my manager, because I didn't have an agent at the time. You didn't allow to have an agent. In the SEC, you're not to have an agent. But I had a manager to help me facilitate everything. And they coincided with the manager to have me to come to Tampa to visit over the weekend. And they said, well, Mr. Coverhouse is going to send his jet to pick you up. I asked my manager, was it okay? Did they check with the NCAA? And he came back and said, Tampa Bay checked with the NCAA, and since you're going to be the first round pick of theirs, that you can fly on their jet. Well, I went there, spent the weekend there, had a nice time visiting with the players, going out to dinner and so forth and so on. I got back to college. I think I played in 2 games. Then the third game that I was about to play in, I was going to the baseball park. And I got to the park in my uniform, and the coach said, Bo, can I talk to you on the side of the building, behind the dugout? I said, yeah. He said, did you take a trip to Tampa Bay last week to go visit them? I said, yes, sir, I did. He said, so how did you go? I said, I flew on the owner's jet. Hugh Coverhouse sent his jet over to Columbus to pick me up. He said, did they check with the NCAA to make sure there's legal? I said, yes, sir. They told me that they did. And he said, Bo, they never did. And the NCAA has declared you ineligible for the rest of the baseball season. And I sat behind the dugout and cried like a baby. I said, well, since they fucked me out of my baseball season, I'm going to fuck them out of their first round draft pick. And it's going to hurt them way more than it's going to hurt me, than what they did to me. And I told them, I said, I will sit out an entire year and go play with another football team before I come and play for Tampa Bay. And they, well, we're going to draft. Well, they figured, well, this is a poor black kid, and then we're going to draft you anyway. And they didn't believe me. And I told them no. I said, nope, I'm not going. I said, I'm sitting out. And then once baseball season was over, in the supplementary baseball draft, so a lot of teams were looking at me. And my head coach, he played a short stint with the Kansas City Royals. So the Kansas City Royals and Art Stewart, who is still the oldest major league scout, scouted me. So they drafted me in the supplementary draft. And then a year afterwards, when my time was up being under the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I could look at other teams, and the Raiders called. So I think I get part of my I wouldn't call it stubbornness, but if I give you my word, that's my bond. If I tell you that I'm gonna hit you in the head with a rock tomorrow at 11:30, no matter where you are, you're gonna get hit in the head with a rock at 11:30 because that's what I did. And so forth and so on. So your word, in my view, is your bond. And if you break that, then you can't be trusted.
There's one thing I heard from Lance's show about your parenting style where you burned your kids' clothes.
In my house, I'm not going to say strict rules, but I don't allow my kids to grow up thinking that they're little rich suburban kids that could do whatever they want. And I have rules just in my house. You take your dirty clothes off, put them in the hamper, or put them in the dirty clothes dry cleaner's bag. And my daughter, she understood that rule. My oldest son, he understood that rule. And my youngest son, Nick, took his clothes off. And I told him, I said, look, the cleaning lady, when she comes here, it's not her job to pick your dirty clothes up off of the floor and put them in there. I said, if that happens again, you will know about it. I didn't tell him what I was going to do. About a week later, I go down and look in the room, and his clothes in the middle of the floor. I picked them all up. I took them out. I had a little smoker out in the backyard. I put them in there, put lighter fluid on them, threw a match in there about 2:45. He gets home about 3:30. Bus drops him off. He comes in. And I say, Nicky, come in here. And I make him stand by the window. And I said, look out in the backyard. Tell me what you see. He said, nothing. I said, what do you see out there that you normally don't see when you look out in the yard? He said, well, I see smoke coming out of that thing. And I said, what do you think that is in that smoker? He said, I don't know. I said, do you remember yesterday what you wore to school? Yeah. I said, do you remember where you left it when you took it off? He said, no. I said, where did you leave? On the floor. I said, guess what? Everything you left on the floor, the remains is in that thing. That's why it's smoking. You want to go out there and take a look? He went out there and got a stick, reached out in there and pulled up. I don't know if it's part of his jeans or his hoodie that he had. And just dropped the stick back there and put his head down. I hadn't had that problem since.
I hope you loved this video as much as I did. Bo knows what you're going to do next, which is check out 3 things. Number 1, which is BoBikesBama.com, which is to raise money for the Alabama Disaster Relief Fund. Number 2, check out Bo's charity called GiveMeAChanceFoundation.org, which helps minority kids get into sports and baseball to help elevate their lives. And number 3, Bo Jackson has a signature meat line. No joke, go check it out, BoJacksonSignatureMeats.com. Bo knows you're going to go do those things. For me with this video, it was an honor to finally meet Bo Jackson, and my biggest takeaway that I've been thinking about constantly, and I think maybe you should think about too, which is be a man or woman of your word. So what that meant to me is like when you say you're going to do something, do it, because Bo knows you're about that. Make sure you hit like and comment, subscribe, whatever else you need to do right in the below, and thank you for watching the video.